This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states, and MLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed by Criminal Mischief guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the show.
I mean, it's just amazing how many people you help, even when you may not be able to get them the resolution that they're looking for.
And that's part of it, and I even try to teach my own children. You may not be successful, but there's a blessing in trying.
Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Branden. You're listening to episode 137, part 2 of A Mother's Fight for Justice.
I want people to know my daughter because she would have been a cancer researcher. She might have discovered new medicine like they're discovering now for cancer. She was beautiful. She was in theater. She danced. She sang. She could have been such a gift to the world, and people would have known her that way. So part of my heart and part of my ego as a mom keeps it on just so everybody knows her.
In last week's episode, 18-year-old college student Brittany Phillips hadn't shown up for school, prompting a worried friend to go check on her.
The lights were on and the door was open, or there's something that struck her as strange. And so she didn't go in, and she called her dad, who back then was a DA in I think Rogers County, which is right north of Tulsa. And she said, "What should I do?" And he said, "Do not go in. Call the Tulsa police to get a wellness check."
Brittany was found murdered inside of her apartment. If you haven't listened to part 1 of A Mother's Fight for Justice, please go to episode 136 in our podcast feed or to our Criminal Mischief YouTube channel first.
It's like out of a horror movie, but this thunderstorm was happening, the big crack of thunder and a knock on the door, and I expected to open the door and it would be my friend. And I opened the door and there's this little young-looking sheriff in a raincoat, and he has a piece of paper in his hands, and he goes, "Are you Maggie Zingman?" And I said, "Yes." He hands me this little piece of paper, and he says, "You need to call Tulsa police. Your daughter's been murdered," and steps back out into the rain.
And leaves?
And leaves.
That's Maggie, Brittany's mother. And after she answered the door that stormy night in September of 2004, she has been on a tireless quest ever since to find her daughter's killer. In 2007 and every year since, Maggie makes a pilgrimage to different parts of the country in what she calls her Caravan to Catch a Killer tour.
How do you get into a police officer's face? Well, national news, maybe their wife, somebody's listening. So I started off just trying to solve our murder. Just somehow I just started seeing wrapped cars in 2007, found this beautiful man who has now wrapped 5 of my cars, and just started doing quadrants, southeast, northeast, northwest, southwest. Would just get out on the road look at the city I was going to, find media that wrote stories about similar things, tell them my mission, find them, get into the city the next morning, hopefully get a story, stay there, get people to come up, tell my story, visit the police office, visit lawmakers.
Maggie has driven thousands of miles in her customized minivan, wrapped with her daughter's photo. The details of her murder, which included the phenotype sketch of one of the 5 DNA profiles found in Brittany's apartment, was hard to miss. Now, that sketch had been created by Parabon in 2017, and it was this image that Maggie had placed on the hood of her minivan in an effort to get tips to help identify who the suspect was.
We got the profile, the blood and semen, sent off to Parabon. They made the phenotype sketch, which, they're unique. So we got, in 2017, that came out. Within a month, we got 75 suspects, 75 tips at least.
On one of Maggie's many tours, she met a woman who would change her life.
You brought up a point. Understaffed, underfunded, etc. That's why a lot of police departments accept these certified, established cold case task force to help investigate these cold cases. It's what helps solve them. Are you aware of Cheryl McCullum?
Yeah, I love Mac. Yeah, love me some Mac.
Yeah, I love me some Mac. Mac, has been a godsend ever since I drove through Atlanta. She got into my car and she got me a story with CBS and Nancy and all these things, and she's just been a godsend.
Cheryl McCollum. I'm a crime scene investigator for a local Atlanta police department. I run the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute. I run the Wildlife CSI Academy, and I have a podcast called Zone 7.
And Zone 7 is, I love this story. It's about how there's different zones in the police department, and Zone 7 is the bar where you meet, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
So there's 6 police zones in Atlanta. So back in the day, keep in mind, we didn't have cell phones, and, folks would have police scanners, and, obviously your boss had a police radio. So if we wanted to let everybody on shift know that we were going to go to the bar after, we would say, 5-9 at Zone 7.
When Matt got word that Maggie was rolling through Atlanta, Georgia, she had to meet her.
And when I first heard about her, there was this mama driving across the United States in a caravan with the suspect's picture on the hood of the car. Yes, I'm going to meet her. Are you kidding me? So she tells me she's coming through Atlanta. She said, do you think we could meet? And I'm like, baby, me. I'm riding shotgun. You tell me where to be, and I am jumping in that car. So she actually came to my police department. Everybody in CID comes out. They're all like, I've never seen anything like it. Like, here's the dude's picture. And the way they got the picture is through phenotyping. It was gangster. Here's this woman in her 70s all by herself, crisscrossing the United States, pulling up in communities, pulling up at truck stops, pulling up wherever to say, hey, you know this guy?
Mac went on that ride along with Maggie through the city of Atlanta and was a witness to the power of a mother's desperate quest to bring her daughter's killer to justice.
As we're driving, truckers are blowing the horn because they can see. As you drive around her car, it shows Brittany. It's clear it's a homicide. By the time you get to the hood, it's like, okay, people are taking pictures so they can post it. We pulled into one famous hotel parking area in Atlanta. I would say 50 people came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did they say to her?
For support and care and concern and hugs, but she got a ton of people taking pictures. Atlanta, we don't play in certain things, and killing a child, I mean, she was 18, but she was a child in her own apartment by herself, not hurting anybody, not doing anything wrong. We had a lot of people taking selfies with the hood, saying, oh, I'm gonna post this right now, like he's somewhere. And it was just an amazing thing.
Maggie shared her frustrations with Mac, how she felt stonewalled by Tulsa PD, even though, according to Maggie, the first 10 years after her daughter's murder, she'd had a really positive experience with the detective who'd been working her case. It was the same investigator who had profusely apologized for that horrendous death notification. This same detective, over the years, kept in contact with Maggie and even shared some of the details of her daughter's case.
I was taught by some of the best in my first 10 years. I know what they can and can't share. I know when they share things with me, I will never share them. And that's why the first group shared a lot with me.
However, by the time Maggie met Cheryl on that ride-along, her relationship with Tulsa PD was pretty much non-existent.
You know, she didn't hold back, Maggie, on her criticism of, it sounds like she had a really great detective for the first 10 years, and then after that, things kind of just plummeted.
Yeah. Maggie, not holding back? That doesn't sound like her.
She's quite a unique person, you know, because
she's a mama bear. Let me tell you something. I can't blame her. I support everything she's doing. And again, when you get to the point you are going to slap a suspect's picture on your car and drive all by yourself, I can't do anything but support that.
Maggie was also asked to remove the phenotype image from the hood of her car after the suspect in the sketch had been identified through investigative genetic genealogy and, according to Tulsa PD, cleared based on his alibi. Investigators didn't tell Maggie who the suspect was, but she pieced together who she thought it could be.
But his ex-girlfriend and her father said he doesn't get angry, whatever. They gave help support the alibi. And I only knew one person who I was thinking, why would the girlfriend and the father say it? And the only reason a father would say it is because the father was a retired police officer. That was the police officer who was the father of my daughter's best friend. What ends up happening is they were there the Friday before she was killed. My daughter is a sweet little girl who at 18 felt bad for her 17-year-old best friend who had a boyfriend and let them sleep at her house. And so she would give them her bed. You know, I mean, a 17-year-old who has a dad as a cop is not going to want to be sleeping at her house, and stuff. And both of them were afraid to say something early on. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But I was in shock.
In the meantime, Mac offered Maggie more than just a listening ear. She offered her hope, a lifeline in the investigation. Because Mac runs the Cold Case Research Institute, which is a network of qualified experts who work for free, offering their help to busy agencies who are stretched thin when it comes to investigating cold cases.
And she's been offering assistance from the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute since 2022. And this Christmas, I did a story with our Channel 6 and said, what's the harm? Why have I been asking for 3 to 5 years for cold case assistance, and Tulsa has been refusing me? And the head of homicide got on, and as I was interviewing with the reporter, the head of homicide, they said that he talked to them. And I said, what did the head of homicide said? And they told me that they were going to have him quoted saying, I don't know what Dr. Zingman's talking about, because she's never offered any ideas about needing cold case assistance.
Mac felt the timing was right in terms of advancements in DNA testing. A lot of cold cases don't have suspect DNA profiles to run down. But remember, in Brittany's case, they had 5 collected from Brittany's apartment back in 2004.
You know, when we first got together, I didn't know if there was anything we could really do or not. I knew that technology was catching up with this case. I knew that Othram would be the way to go. And let me be really clear with people. I don't know everything. That is the reason I work with a team. I have over, 800 experts that I can draw from. I can call them right now. They don't want any money from me. They don't want any credit. Nancy Grace being one of them. So I preach, who cares what I think? But when I put 10, 30, 75, 100 of my people on it, I would stake my reputation on it. They are not wrong. And in this situation, there are some things that, if nothing else, communication needs to be different. And let me be clear. If you say to somebody that has had a child murdered, I'm going to call you every month, and you don't, that damages them.
2025, it feels like this stuff should have been tested by now.
Right. We did have some DNA, but we didn't have ancestry. So if your DNA wasn't in the system and we didn't have a sample to cross-check, we weren't going to get to you anyway. But that's why I'm saying technology has caught up. That's why I started calling them. You don't have to guess anymore. We do have phenotyping. We do have ancestry. We can get to you now and tell everybody what you look like.
The thing is, Mac's in law enforcement. She understands protecting details of a murder investigation is critical. She also knows that just because Tulsa PD isn't talking with Maggie doesn't mean that they're not working the case. But she says cutting off communication with the mother of a murder victim on so many levels is just not the way to go. And Mac's hackles went up further after her offer of qualified experts to assist Tulsa PD pro bono was ignored.
The chief of police came to Atlanta to a conference. I reached out. I will buy you a drink. I will buy you dinner. You can swing by my police department. Just meet with me for 5 minutes. I think I have an idea. Here's my idea. You want me to just tell you what it is?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So there is a suspect in the beginning. There was blood in the sink and his seminal fluid on Brittany's bedsheet. Okay? 2 different biological specimens in 2 separate rooms of her small apartment. Sounds like a good suspect, right? They come back and they say, we've cleared him because of an alibi. They won't say what the alibi is. Sounds strange. They won't confirm how absolutely that they know that this alibi is true. It may be, but here's what I proposed. What I was trying to tell the chief and everybody else and the lead detective. And let me say this part. When they would not call me back, I was leaving them messages with what my idea was. So I know they still had to have heard it. You've got to get that stuff to Othram because, again, 2 different biological specimens in 2 different rooms. Really? That's going to be a hard sell for anybody not to say, okay, so here's what I proposed. That same sheet, you're telling me that he just had a romantic interlude, clearly not using a condom, right?
Yeah.
If that sheet does not have vaginal fluid, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about?
Yeah.
There's no way that happened without there being evidence of a woman on those sheets as well. She had to get up. She had to scoot out of bed. Think about it.
Yeah, no, that's a really, so you called and said, hey, let me take you out for a drink. Come down to the station. Yeah. I'll buy you dinner. Let's meet. And you're not the mom who, right. Let's face it, like you said, it feels like the relationship has, there's no trust in there on either side. But right. He's not calling you back. So he never called you back.
Never. Neither has the lead detective until recently because of something I said on a podcast.
What did you say? Say it again.
The truth.
What was it?
Because here's that they're not calling anybody back. That, they just want us to blanketly accept all of these things. But when you refuse to call the mama back, that's not okay. I don't care what you think the relationship is. What you feel about her doesn't matter. You don't have to like the person. You don't have to get along with the person. Listen, your lead detective, y'all aren't friends anyway. That you came to know each other through tragedy, and they just happened to be assigned to this case, and that can change. So again, call somebody back, whether you have new information or not.
Just to be clear, as I mentioned last week, I reached out to the Tulsa Police Department with an interview request and have not heard back. Now, Maggie says after suspect number 1 was cleared based on his alibi, she then turned her attention to the other 4 suspect DNA profiles, which had been collected from her daughter's apartment. All of them had been uploaded to CODIS, the National DNA Offender Database, years before, but they hadn't gotten any hits.
About 3 years ago, doing an interview with Paul Holes in the Murder Squad, and Polly, God love her, got me $6,000 to send more DNA off. We were planning before the second detective retired in 2023 we were planning, after I got the money, we were going to be able to send off another profile. $6,000 just to send off one profile.
Are you talking about the other 4?
Yeah, but one of the other 4.
One of the other 4, okay.
Which the detective never told me what this next profile was and why the hell they didn't send it out the first time. I have no idea. Because guess what this next profile that is now being analyzed by Othram is?
Fingernails?
DNA collected from underneath a murder victim who was sexually assaulted before being smothered to death. Well, it was a no-brainer that that profile should be investigated through genetic genealogy.
I didn't know that they had underneath the nails. And that's what was sent to Othram. When I learned that it was underneath the nails, I no longer thought it was the boyfriend, because guess what? To send DNA out and to be a separate profile, it doesn't match the other profiles. And underneath the nails, we already knew didn't match the blood and semen profile.
But that's so, like, you talk about twists and turns, you know, having the backstory with the friend and the boyfriend and the fact that they would be sleeping in her bed and, like, of course they're teenagers and they're gonna have sex, you know, probably, right? And that they're following this false lead, and then it wouldn't match under the fingernails. So that makes the fingernails really strong.
Yeah. I mean, why? You know, or was it that they didn't, which also, you know, we start wondering about what things gone. Why did I never hear? Jeff was so good in sharing things with me, and that's something I need to ask him.
Jeff was the name of the original detective who worked Brittany's case for the first 10 years. And at this time, Maggie doesn't know the status of those fingernail scrapings, which were sent to Othram for more advanced DNA testing as well as investigative genetic genealogy.
Maggie, they know her by now. They know almost what she needs and requires. Then call and say, Maggie, look, I got nothing new to tell you, but I want you to know I read back through the file yesterday. The guys in CID, we had a round table. You know, the evidence is at Othram. We thought that was a great idea. We're waiting on those results, but while we're waiting, we are still doing blank. In other words, why isn't Brittany on their Facebook every 3 months? Why aren't you still going on podcast yourself saying, does anybody remember? Did anybody see? Are you looking at arrest in a 50-mile area? Let her know you're doing those things instead of just silence.
This episode is brought to you by Hulu, presenting Paradise. Paradise is Hulu's critically acclaimed addictive drama series starring Sterling K. Brown, Julianne Nicholson, and James Marsden. The Daily Beast calls Paradise your next TV obsession, and the New York Times says it's exhilarating in all the right ways. Paradise is for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. For more information, visit fyc.hulu.com.
Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. And as your vacation maximizationer, I'm going to make sure you hear the maximum sizzle of Comfort Inn's free hot breakfast. Let's get real close. Maximum apple. Now that's fresh crispimization. Maximum waffle. Hear that crunch. And that's maximum coffee. Oh yeah, that's the pour I'm talking about. Breakfast maximized before hitting the road. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
This episode is brought to you by SelectQuote. Life insurance can have a huge impact on our family's future. With SelectQuote, getting covered with the right policy for you is simple and affordable. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents will tailor your experience to find a life insurance policy for your needs in as little as 15 minutes. And SelectQuote partners with carriers that provide policies for many conditions. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Go to SelectQuote.com/SpotifyPod today to get started.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
And what about that card? Remember the one that Brittany's father had received in the mail after her murder? The one that he'd put away for safekeeping and only realized in January of 2023, when he took it out again, that the postmark on that envelope had been electronically stamped on the 29th, 2 days before Brittany supposedly died.
But again, we know it says on there, PM, plain as Dallas, it says that on there, the 29th. Well, let's go back. That means somebody came into contact with Brittany, a friend, let's say, because remember, she wasn't feeling great. What if she said, hey, will you mail this for me? Sure, no problem. What if she mailed it? Either way, somebody mailed this the evening of the 29th. Now, if you had a buddy that you saw and she said, hey, can you mail this for me? Would you not remember that?
Absolutely.
If a day or two later you found out she had been murdered?
Yes. I that's one of those things where it's like when you're thinking about it, you would absolutely remember and you would come forward.
Would absolutely remember, and nobody has ever come forward. So it seems to me like Brittany mailed this. If that's true, that alibi is trash.
Mag is referring to the alibi of the donor of the blood and semen found at Brittany's apartment. The suspect whose picture had been on the hood of Maggie's car in 2017, after a phenotype sketch was made based on his DNA that had been left behind at the scene, who would also later be identified through investigative genetic genealogy and then cleared by the Tulsa PD based on a rock-solid alibi.
So again, my question is, if I'm in somebody's apartment and they end up being murdered, and then they have a picture that looks a lot like me on the hood of that mama's car, I'm going to call somebody. I'm not just going to stay silent and let her drive around America with my picture on her car.
Yeah, there's so many weird, like you said, twists and turns.
Either Brittany mailed it, or a friend did, or bizarre, the killer did, which I don't believe. I believe the first two things are the most likely, and I think Brittany is the most likely. So if that happened, your alibi of a person that left two different biological samples is null and void. Doesn't matter what he's doing the 27th or the 28th. You now have to move that needle. You've got to go back to him. You have to go back and ask the medical examiner, can we narrow this? If this is true, is it a possibility the time of death could be here? You don't have a choice but to do that, in my opinion.
The thing about this envelope is that everyone seems to get that Tulsa PD, like many other departments, are stretched super thin. But what's unclear is why they're not taking Mag up on her offer for help. And according to Maggie, there have been other qualified organizations who have offered assistance that they haven't taken up on either.
I don't even expect them to reach me out of the blue, but currently Tulsa police will not even respond to my emails. Tulsa police, I tried calling them and they said they never got the message. I write an email once every month just to ask 3 same questions, and I don't get responses. The head chief, who was deputy chief, says he doesn't want his detectives talking to the families because they need to focus on the case.
For Mac, focusing on the case should mean going back to the suspect with the rock-solid alibi and double-checking where he was, not only on the night they believe Brittany was murdered, but in the days following, based on this new envelope evidence.
The reality, if I were the chief, what you do with Maggie, you bring her in, you sit her down, and you assign somebody to her, whether it's a victim advocate or a detective, somebody, and you say, this is your person. Here's his cell phone number or her cell phone number. You make sure that that person every week checks in. Phone call, text message, email, doesn't matter, but just, hey, how are you? As she's traveling this country, let me tell you something real easy. Tulsa calls Florida, calls Georgia, calls Seattle, Atlanta, Baltimore, and says, hey, one of our victims' mothers coming through, just letting you know, but if she needs anything, would you be there for her? How hard is that?
I mean, that just as you were saying that, I was thinking, you know how good that would probably make her feel?
Right.
I mean, that's what
70-something alone in a vehicle that could break down, could run out of gas, could have a flat tire, but it's a phone call. And we do it all the time. It should be done for her. Now, here's what happened. Tragically, she gets this wrap on her car with this person's photograph. Caucasian male, blonde hair, blue eyes, dimples, freckles, whatever. Here it is on her car. Then she gets a call and says, hey, you got to take that off your car. Wrong guy. The blood and the seminal fluid checks out. It's this guy. He's not our guy. He's got an airtight alibi. You got to take it off. So for all these years where she's out looking for this cat, ain't him. Now, here's where another question I have for this airtight alibi person. You know you were in her apartment. You know you were just having a romantic interlude with your girlfriend. You know your seminal fluid's on her bed. Chances are, you know you didn't wash the sheets, right? You know, you have to know. You either cut yourself, had a nosebleed, some reason you got blood in her sink. You know bloody well that photograph looks like you. And all those years she's driving all across everywhere, you don't ever call and say, hey, I think that looks like me, but I didn't kill anybody. And here's the thing about Brittany's case. Nobody is saying that the young man that left the samples killed her. What we are saying is if the envelope changes it, go back and have a conversation. If the timeline could possibly be different. Second, why not share with Maggie? Maggie, look, he had a cousin that graduated from the Naval Academy. Here he is in all the pictures on these 3 days. Great. Let her rest then. Let her stop thinking about it.
In part 1 of this story, I mentioned a hatch or attic space, which investigators discovered in Brittany's apartment. That's what it was referred to in some of the news reports that I'd read online. However, according to Mac, it wasn't a hatch, but a little door in Brittany's closet.
There's always a twist in a cold case, and here it comes. Maggie's apartment was built, if you think about almost like the Pentagon, right? Or any prison that you know of. The apartments are connected, but behind them is a way that the maintenance person can walk behind every one of them and work on pipes or electricity without having to go into your apartment. In Brittany's closet, there was like this secret door. Nobody ever even noticed it. But if you move that panel, you can crawl out there. And then you can enter any of the other apartments.
Is this what they refer to as like the attic space? But it wasn't the attic. This is like some
it's not
weird.
Really an attic.
Okay,
right.
so and was hers, because I used to live in an apartment in Seattle that was like really old and it like controlled the thermostat for like the entire, brick, if you imagine Seattle back in the 90s, and our manager would come in. It was so annoying, and he would have to fiddle with the thermostat. And is it that kind of thing where her apartment was like, it had that special thing, or did all of the apartments have that?
All of them. But this little door would lead you to the back. Like, have you ever seen Escape from Alcatraz?
Yeah.
When they busted through that back wall, they were in this little catwalk kind of area behind the cells.
Mm-hmm.
And behind there is when you could work on the plumbing or the electricity without having to go into the prison cells. But you could walk the whole prison kind of in this square without having to go in the cells. It was built the same way.
So each apartment had one of those.
Correct.
Little secret squirrels.
Area.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Which means I could go into apartment B and go into apartment A, C, or D. So let's say one of those apartments was empty. Could the maintenance man go into an empty apartment and therefore enter another apartment without having to go through the door or window or sliding glass door? Yes.
That's terrifying.
Terrifying.
So they still don't know. It sounds like the slider or the balcony is one place that they think that the suspect could have entered, or this side secret squirrel place that who knows if she even knew about it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It was really weird. So when I was working on Brittany's case, we took our daughter to Athens, Georgia to college and got her set up in an apartment. I would have never in a million years looked in the closet for some attic space or little crawl space door. It would have never dawned on me. I'm sure that Maggie never thought to look into a closet or anywhere else for some secret passageway.
Absolutely. Like just that in my apartment I was just talking about, like I had no idea that we had this heating system that was responsible for it was like a thermostat. But the guy, the apartment maintenance guy, he would come all the time, and I started thinking, why is he coming all the time? Like it kind of, my spidey sense as a young woman kind of flared up a little bit, because it felt like when he was there, he was also looking. And I didn't really make that connection until, doing true crime, then it's like, oh, wow, my suspicion was probably right that he was coming in, because he would come at all different times,
of course. But if you don't live in an apartment and you hear somebody say, oh, the maintenance guy can come in anytime, whether it's to spray for bugs, make a repair, check on a water leak, whatever. That's a weird thing.
Very weird.
Yeah, it's like
very weird.
Like, you should have to call me and say, hey, can I possibly come over at this time? And I'm going to knock on the door and you can open it or not. Not, I'm just coming in. Like, that's a weird thing. So, yes. So for people in the next couple of months that are headed off to college, check the closet.
Ask if there's some secret space. But you're thinking like, okay, have they checked with the maintenance people to see that worked there previously, or the people that lived in the apartment who if they had one of these in their unit, then they would know that the other units probably had it too. So has that due diligence been done? Is that what you're thinking?
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So you've got to rule out maintenance. You've got to rule out other tenants. You've got to rule out people that visit other tenants. So, for example, the friend that she let in to have the romantic twist, could he have gone in there, tryst, could he have gone into Brittany's apartment and accessed other apartments? The answer is yes, he could have. So the reverse could be true. Somebody could have somebody that visits them while they're at work, but could also get into other apartments.
And what about those other 3 suspect DNA profiles that, according to Maggie, could be sent to a lab for investigative genetic genealogy? Based on Maggie's track record, she'd be an excellent resource for investigators to tap instead of ignoring.
I've traveled over 300,000 miles through 48 states on 23 tours since 2007, all self-funded. My first 10 years, I wouldn't eat, I wouldn't fix my air conditioner, I wouldn't fix my water heater, I would drive cars till they were dead and borrow on them. I mean, I lived without a lot for those first 10 years because I would work overtime and use that overtime to travel, it felt like that was the only way to keep the story going, and now like I said, it's more for the families. But I am doing my 24th tour in the Northwest quadrant starting all of August, because in September 4th through 7th, or right around that weekend, is CrimeCon 2025, where unbelievably they have gifted me a table, and so I'm going to be able to get her story out.
In the meantime, Mac has a philosophy on investigations that has served her well, and something she feels is sorely missing in the murder investigation of Brittany Phillips.
So my advice, when you have a case, do not make promises. I'm going to repeat that. Do not make promises. I jokingly tell people when Walt and I got married, our wedding vows were, hey, we're going to give it a shot. Okay?
that no truer thing has ever been said when you're talking about marriage.
Baby, if you get real specific, I'm going to cook for you every day. I'm going to keep that house like a Navy ship. Don't say that. Don't say that. I want 12 babies. I'll take care of either one of them. I'll get up happily every time they need something. Don't say that. Okay? When you tell a victim or their family, I will catch the person, don't ever say that. You may not. Don't ever say, I'm going to call you every week. You may not. You can't. 1 week you're going to be on vacation. 1 week you may be out sick. You may be on maternity leave. Don't make promises. Tell them the truth. I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to bring in other people if I need to. You know, you feel free to call me anytime. Well, I'll call you back as quick as I can. Those are very different statements, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's what, like, when you're dealing with a personality like Maggie, who wants to be involved and she wants to know what's happening. So it's funny because my co-host Brandon and I were talking about this the other day about how when I was interviewing Barbara Butcher, I don't know if you know who she is.
I adore that woman.
I know, isn't she amazing?
Yeah.
And she was saying that, you know, her creed was, if somebody, I'm going to tell them the truth about what happened to their loved one. I'm going to tell them if they want to know how they died, if it was painful. I'm not going to go into gory detail, but I'm going to tell them if they suffered, but I'm going to mitigate that with, you know, trying to kind of talk, you know, not just say, oh, well, she was in a fire and she horribly burned to death and it was terrible. Right. And it's kind of like sometimes some people, they want to know that. They want to know. Has that been your experience too? Where it's like, because it feels like Maggie would she's the type of person who would want to know exactly what happened and not have it sugar-coated, and she wants to know. And
I know people that, because of their heart, believed that they were doing the family a favor by saying, oh no, they died instantly, they didn't suffer. Well, then the trial comes and they find out that's not true. Well, now you have put them in a tailspin they didn't deserve. I believe in telling the truth. And here is what I have found. The worst possible thing has already happened. Somebody's had a child murdered horribly, violently, and they suffered before they died, whether it was a sexual assault or a beating, whatever it was. The worst thing's already happened. The truth often will give comfort, meaning she fought back, or, you know, she didn't die immediately, but valiantly. Tell them the truth.
At the end of the day, Maggie is a mother who wants to find out who murdered her daughter. And at the very least, she wants to believe that the people investigating her case are doing everything they can to help her do that.
If they blow you off, you're not the type of person that's going to just sit and take that lightly. I mean, you've proven that time and time and time again.
And that's what everybody, Mac, the sheriff, all of them say. He said, you know, they don't like you. They can't blow you off. They've tried to lie, you know. And if I didn't have all these others behind the scenes saying, you're not imagining it, Maggie, you know, this is going on, it's just crazy. You know, and it just doesn't make sense, you know, and you know,
the therapist, is that, because a lot of people, they don't realize they're being manipulated and that they're a part of this cycle. You know what I mean? You know it's happening. You are aware, not only with your own training, but you've got experts who are now in your camp, and they're like, no, it's happening.
Yeah. Well, but you know, the crazy thing is briefly, I was back to being that victim again, because when the chief was deputy chief and I was writing and calling and writing emails, he said to me, well, Maggie, the reason we don't respond to you is because you're sending too many emails and you're making them too long. And so, little victim that I was, I thought, well, I'll make them shorter and I'll only write them once every couple of months. They still don't communicate with me. So I even fell into that mode of, because with abusive people, at some point, if any of us are involved in those relationships, we go, maybe if I do this, they won't hurt me. Maybe if I do this, then they won't get as angry. And for a while I was doing that, and I finally said, F that, you know, but I did fall into that. But and that, you just hit the crux of it. Why do I do this? You know, we go back to the thing, that early question, and everybody isn't as hard-headed or resilient or whatever you want to call it that I am. And being treated like this, which I know of other families who are, can just tear a person apart and devastate them and beat them down. And I just, you know, with me, you can make me more of a fighter. You do something to me, watch out, because I'm coming back twofold.
If you have any information, please reach out to the Tulsa Police Department Cold Case Unit at 918-586-1357. Or you can contact Maggie at her Brittany Phillips Facebook page or at BrittanyPhillipsMurder.net. Up next, Criminal Mischief bonus content. Here, my co-host Branden Morgan and I discuss the case in more detail. And if you want to listen and watch the show, head on over to Criminal Mischief's YouTube channel at EVO Creative. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Branden Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.